The twin suns hung heavy over the gilded towers of Almyra, casting long shadows across the Empire's capital. From the highest spire of the Sky Court, Empress Calith watched in silence as a slow-moving haze crept across the horizon. The desert storms had always come without warning, but this one felt different, ominous, like a veil being drawn over something the Empire had chosen not to see for too long. Behind her, Grand Strategist Elian adjusted his ceremonial mantle, more concerned with appearances than the growing tension in the court. "The merchant guilds have raised tariffs again," he said without turning. "Another provocation, but we still hold the trade routes. They won't dare push further." Calith said nothing. She'd heard the same confidence before the riots in the southern provinces, before the mutiny on the Skyward Fleet. Each time, her advisors had promised control, and each time, control had slipped just a little further from her grasp. "Summon the inner circle," she said at last. "Tonight." Elian hesitated. "The council hasn't met since the proclamation. That was before an entire convoy disappeared in the ash vents," she snapped. "Before Senator Corian was found dead with a cipher buried in his throat." A moment of silence passed between them, the kind that grew roots. Elian nodded and withdrew. Calith remained, eyes fixed on the coming storm. She wondered if it was already too late. The circle convened beneath the citadel, where no light touched the walls, and even sound seemed to dull in the air. 11 figures sat in a hollow ring. Diplomats, generals, seers, and scholars, each bearing the insignia of their house, but cloaked in anonymity. Only Calith stood unmasked, her presence command enough. "I'll make this plain," she began, voice echoing. "We are losing control. The provinces burn with dissent, the skyward colonies have gone silent, and there are whispers even among the core families. If there's a plan to overthrow me, I want to hear it now." A murmur rose. None claimed responsibility, but none offered denial. It was Lord Duran, the aging Keeper Lore, who finally spoke. "It may not be treason, Majesty. It may be something older." Calith frowned. "Speak plainly." He placed a scroll on the table, yellowed and cracked. "There are records buried deep beneath the Fourth Library. Histories of an exodus, a hidden truth about how the Empire began. They mentioned something called the Dorsai. The name was unfamiliar, yet it sparked a chill in the air. Beside him, Commander Jexa of the Crimson Guard stiffened. "My scouts intercepted a fragment from the outer moon's last cycle. It spoke of a ghost fleet, moving in patterns that mimic our own supply chains. It bore the Dorsai mark." Calith stepped forward. "You're telling me we are being hunted? By myths?" Duran looked up, unflinching. "I'm telling you we were never alone in our rise to power. And now the debt may be due." Silence again. Heavier now. Not fear, but recognition. As if a hidden truth had just stepped from shadow into candlelight. From the edge of the circle, a soft voice broke through. "Then it's time," said Meles, the courtseer. "We must activate the vault." Elian recoiled. "That would mean—" "It means nothing if we wait too long," Calith interrupted. "If this threat is real, if our empire is built on forgotten blood, we must know, and we must survive." Outside the citadel, the capital city shimmered in golden stillness. But far below, in the underspires, where the forgotten toiled and the discarded thrived, the first tremors of change stirred. Toval, a low-born engineer with more secrets than loyalty, adjusted the resonance coils of the eastern conduit. The lights flickered with each pulse. He paused, hand hovering over the manual override. It had been days since he'd received a signal from the surface. And the last message? A single word burned into the channel. "Run." He turned as a shadow fell across the chamber. "You shouldn't be here," he said. The figure stepped closer, hood drawn, voice familiar. "Neither should you. Not without telling me why the core readings show stress beyond limit." Toval exhaled. "Because something beneath the city is waking up." The figure lowered the hood. It was Vera, his sister, once a data archivist, now part of a resistance cell Toval pretended not to support. Her eyes burned with questions. "I think they're activating the vault," he whispered. "I don't know why, but it's bad. It was never meant to open." Vera's breath caught. "Then it's true. The Dorsai were real. And the vault isn't a weapon. It's a door. Later that night, in the Empress's private chamber, Kayla stood before a mirror that did not reflect her image. Instead, it shimmered with starlight, an ancient technology no one fully understood. It had belonged to the founders, the Empire's mythic first architects. When she touched its frame, the stars shifted, aligning into a single burning line. She spoke, barely a whisper. "Show me what they've hidden." The mirror flared. A vision formed, planets consumed by shadow, fleets disintegrating in silence, a single figure standing atop a ruin, wearing her crown. Caliph recoiled. The image vanished. Outside, the storm reached the walls of Elmira. But it was not wind or sand that howled through the streets. It was something older. The Empire was no longer the predator. It was the prey. And somewhere deep in the bones of its capital, a machine long dormant stirred to life. The rain fell in oily sheets as Toval crouched beneath the edge of a half-collapsed tram tunnel, sparks flickering from severed wires above. The city had known real rain in decades, not like this, cold, dirty, unnatural. But Toval wasn't here to talk about weather. His eyes were fixed on the blinking beacon wedged into the stone, the signal he'd been told to wait for. It pulsed 3 times, then stopped. "They're in," he muttered. From behind him, Vera emerged, soaked but determined. "If this goes wrong." "It already has," he cut her off. "We're just trying to survive what's left." They moved quickly through the corridor's belly, bypassing old surveillance grids and crawling through ducts the architects had long forgotten. Vera carried a short-range disruptor, modified beyond anything legal. Toval, as always, carried nothing but a toolkit and a brain honed on failure. By the time they reached the subrail junction, the others were already waiting. General Jexa stood tall, despite the grime and weight of exile. Her crimson armor was scratched but intact, and her presence drew silence. Across from her, Melis kept her gaze on the far wall, whispering quietly to herself, prophecies that she claimed weren't for anyone's ears but her own. And beside her, masked and still, was a last arrival, a spy master known only as Callan. His allegiance was to information, nothing more. Jexa didn't waste time. "This is a plan," she said. "In 4 hours, the vault will reach phase alignment. When it does, Caliph will activate it, believing she's accessing hidden knowledge. In reality, she'll be opening a corridor to them." Vera stepped forward. "The Dorsai?" Callan's voice, dry as ash, answered. "Not Dorsai. What comes after. What they were running from." A pause. Toval stared at them. "You knew this? You knew what was in there and still let it happen?" "No," Jexa said. "We knew enough to fear it. That's why we formed the council. That's why we built the contingency." She reached into her cloak and pulled a small cube. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the beacon. "This is the key," she continued. "It overrides the vault's control signal. If we get close enough to the core, we can shut it down before the portal stabilizes." Toval frowned. "And if it's already stable, then we pray there's something left to shut down." The team moved out in silence, each step drawing them closer to the heart of the Citadel. Their path twisted through forgotten corridors and maintenance shafts buried beneath centuries of construction. Along the way, they passed the bones of a previous age. Machines older than memory, symbols etched in languages no one now spoke. Vera stopped once, tracing a carving with her fingers. "What is it?" Toval asked. "Nothing," she said. "Just feels familiar." They reached the inner vault 2 hours before phase alignment. Already, the air shimmered with static, and the walls hummed as though alive. A gate, circular and vast, loomed ahead, dormant, yet waiting. Jexa signaled. Callan peeled off to disable the surveillance feed. Toval approached the primary interface, and Vera set the disruptor. "I need time," Toval muttered, fingers flying across ancient glyphs. "These controls respond to thought as much as touch. If I push too hard..." A klaxon cut him off. Red lights flared. "They know we're here," Jexa said. "Impossible," Callan growled, rejoining. "I masked the signal paths." Then someone inside let them see. Meili said calmly, "The future has already changed. The first wave of sentinels arrived with mechanical precision. Drones of obsidian alloy, eyes glowing pale blue. Jexa moved first, her blades slicing arcs of light through the air. Vera followed, disruptor flaring with shrill bursts. Callan vanished into shadow, striking from behind. Toval didn't look back. He accessed the gate's core, dragging thought and code into alignment. The interface resisted him, its consciousness half awake, half dreaming. It whispered in forgotten tongues. You do not belong. He gritted his teeth. Then make room. The key flared in Jexa's hand, synchronizing. Do it now, she shouted. But the gate pulsed, once, twice, and then stabilized on its own. A shape appeared in the center. Humanoid, featureless, tall as two men and cloaked in fluid light. Maylis gasped. Not them. Not yet. The figure turned its head, though it had no face. Everyone froze. It spoke without speaking. The Empire remembers. So do we. Then it raised a hand, and everything convulsed. Jexa charged. Her blade struck air. No, not air. Something that moved around impact, denying it. The figure barely reacted. Vera fired, but her shots vanished in ripples. Toval screamed as the interface flooded his mind with static. The cube fell from Jexa's hand and skittered across the floor. Maylie stepped forward. No, Toval gasped. Don't. But the seer raised her arms, chanting in a tongue only she knew. The air thickened and the gate shuddered. The figure paused. Then, slowly, it receded into the portal. Not defeated, but waiting. The light dimmed. The gate powered down. Silence. Toval collapsed to his knees. It worked, he said hoarsely. Maylie said nothing. She was gone, her body there, but eyes hollow, mind emptied. A price had been paid. Jexa retrieved the cube. We have to leave. The Empress will come. We'll be hunted for this. Callan emerged from the dark, face grim. Then we vanish. We take the key, the knowledge, and we disappear before they can erase us. Vera nodded, helping Toval to his feet. Where? Jexa's gaze turned upward, to the edge, beyond the colonies. There's still a route through the wastes. If we move now, we can reach it before the Empire locks down. Toval looked back at the gate one last time. It seemed smaller now, or maybe just quiet. They slipped away through the tunnels, leaving behind a machine that had spoken in echoes and shadows. Above them, alarms rang and soldiers scrambled, but they were already ghosts. By the time Caleb arrived, the chamber was empty. The portal was dormant, but the air still buzzed with memory. She stepped toward the console, fingers brushing its surface. A spark leapt into her hand. A whisper followed. You open the door. You cannot close it alone. Her eyes narrowed. Then I'll burn the world trying. The stars above the waste burned brighter than anywhere in the known systems, as if the sky itself had been scorched clean. Toval stared upward from the cargo hatch of the old transport skimming low over cracked terrain, the wind slapping metal like a drumbeat. He'd never felt this far from the Empire, and yet the Empire still clung to his thoughts like frostbite. Below deck, Jexa was running diagnostics on the hull plating, murmuring instructions to a half-working console. Vera stood at the viewport, watching the terrain blur past, eyes hollow from too many sleepless hours. And Callan, as always, remained a ghost, barely speaking unless it mattered. Only one voice had vanished entirely. Maylis had not spoken since the encounter at the vault. Her body lived. She ate and moved when prompted, but her mind remained elsewhere, like she caught a glimpse of something too vast to return from. She sat near the rear of the hold, staring into a shard of broken mirror they'd found in a supply crate. Sometimes her lips moved silently, reciting things no one dared interpret. The signal is changing, Jexa said, snapping Toval back to the present. We're being tracked. We left no trace, Vera argued. We blacked the gate, scrambled the core feeds. Jexa didn't answer immediately. She turned the monitor toward them. The pulse signature glowed faintly, but its pattern was clear, triangulating, narrowing. They're not tracking us through tech, Toval muttered. It's her. They all turned to Maylis. She looked back as if waking from a trance. "It followed me," she said softly. "Not all of it, just a piece." Silence wrapped around them like cloth. No one asked what it was. They'd all seen enough to guess. Callan stepped forward. "We reach the outer colonies in 36 hours. We dock, scatter, disappear. The key will be dismantled and sent to separate ends of the system. We were never here." "No," Jexa said. "We can't scatter yet. We don't even know what we stopped, or if we stopped it at all." Vera folded her arms. "We saw it retreat." "Did we?" Jexa countered. "Or did it mark us, test us, and wait?" Toval sighed. "We need answers, not arguments. If we can't go back, we need someone who remembers what came before." There was only one place that fit that need: the Preservatorium, a drifting archive outside regulated space. It housed exiled knowledge, rogue AIs, and minds that had lived beyond the span of flesh. Getting there meant entering the Orion Shroud, a nebula thick with storms and ruin, but they had no better choice. Toval keyed the course manually. He didn't trust auto-navigation. "Settle in," he said. "If anything's still watching, we'll feel in there." The journey into the Shroud was nothing like Toval expected. The stars dimmed, yes, but so did sound. Every frequency dulled. Machinery lagged. It felt like flying through molasses made of silence. And then the voices began. Not out loud, but in thoughts, dreams, whispers at the edges of reason. Vera woke screaming the second night, convinced her mother had spoken to her from the dead. Jexa stopped speaking entirely for 12 hours, lips pressed into a line, her eyes twitching at shadows. Even Callan, so composed, began to sweat and twitch in his sleep. Only Maylis remained calm, humming fragments of lullabies from a world no one remembered. When the Preservatorium finally appeared, silver, oblong, and still spinning after 300 years of exile, it felt like a hallucination. But the docking clamps held, and the airlocks responded. Inside, they found dust and silence. Holograms flickered weakly. Long-forgotten AIs muttered nonsense in corridors. But deeper in the core, they found what they had come for: a construct named Corinos. It took the form of an old man, robes flowing like digital smoke. His voice was a lattice of tones, calm, ancient, layered with subharmonics meant to soothe. "You carry the key," he said without preamble. "And the wound." Jexa stepped forward. "We need to know what we faced, what lies behind that gate." Corinos nodded. "The Dorsai were not your ancestors. They were your shepherds. They did not build the empire. They merely steered away from extinction. The vault is not a vault. It is a scar left by those who came before the Dorsai, a last warning hidden as power. And we opened it," Vera whispered. "You always would," Corinos replied. "The design of your empire, its ambition, its structure, it is recursive. Every generation that survives must test the wound again. You are the first to survive it and turn away." Toval frowned. "What was that thing?" "A scribe," the AI answered. "A remnant of the architects who first crossed dimensions and left ruin in their wake. It exists not to destroy, but to observe, to catalog collapse. It marks civilizations when they peak. When they begin to fracture, it returns." Jexa's voice was hard. "So it's not done." "No," Corinos said. "It has only begun to watch." A long pause settled like ash. Callan spoke next. "Then why retreat at all? Why leave us alive?" "Because you changed the pattern," Corinos said. "You did not submit. You fractured. You fled. That divergence is a question it cannot yet answer, and so it waits." Toval looked at Maylis, whose eyes had begun to weep slowly, though she made no sound. Corinos turned to her. She saw further than any. The scribe left something behind, a key within the key. Jexa raised a cube. "What does that mean?" "Give it time," Corinos said. "It will unfold. And when it does, your escape will become more than survival. It will become prophecy." Vera's hand tightened on her disruptor. "You expect us to just keep running?" "No," Corinos said. "I expect you to build something new. The scribe expects you to fail. Prove it wrong." They left the Preservatorium with more questions and answers, But one truth had settled among them. Their escape hadn't ended the story. It had only rewritten its beginning. Back aboard the ship, as the engines hummed to life and the shroud began to thin behind them, Melis finally spoke. "It's learning from us." Jexa turned. "What is?" "The scribe," she whispered. "It knows our names now." And somewhere across the dark between stars, something watched, waiting for the next move. The settlement rose like a question in the dust, its structures half buried beneath the red sands of the colony world called Exeler. It had no official name, no imperial record, no beacon to draw attention. It wasn't meant to. Toval crouched atop a rusted comms tower, scanning the horizon with a modified lens scope. 3 moons floated low over the plain like watching eyes. He hated the way they never blinked. Below him, life moved quietly. Children ran between solar struts. Old world banners stitched from memory hung limp between dwellings. They had been here for 6 months, long enough to forget what day it was, but not long enough to believe they were safe. No one ever said the word empire anymore, but it hung behind every sentence like a ghost. In the central courtyard, Jexa paced beneath the converted weather dome, issuing daily drills to the militia. She still wore remnants of her old armor, stripped of insignia, dented from a dozen battles. But her authority remained unquestioned. She wasn't just a soldier now. She was their spine. Vera had become their voice. She ran supply chains, organized rations, negotiated with scavengers who occasionally drifted close enough to trade. Her sharp tongue and quicker instincts had saved them more than once. Toval often watched her work and marveled at how little remained of the archivist she'd once been. War had rewritten them all. Melis, however, remained unchanged, at least on the surface. She moved through the settlement like a shadow dressed in white, never sleeping more than an hour, her gaze always distant. She spoke rarely, but when she did, people listened as if the words were carved in stone. The children had begun to call her the Echo, though no one could say why. Callan had vanished shortly after the Preservatorium. No one knew where, and no one tried to find out. He left behind a single phrase, burned into a data core. "The second door has no key." It had kept Toval awake for nights. He'd scoured the decrypted data from a vault, from Carinos, from the fractured logs. Melis whispered aloud in her sleep, but nothing offered clarity, only more shadows. The key, once their salvation, now rested dormant inside a containment field in the underground lab. Toval had dismantled it once, out of curiosity or fear, but the pieces reassembled themselves within hours. It wanted to be whole, and increasingly it whispered. It started with flashes, names that hadn't been spoken aloud, coordinates for places that didn't exist, fragments of language no translation engine could touch. Then a week ago, it showed him something else, a simulation of the Empire, centuries ahead, ruled not by people, but by observation itself. Drones, judges, cities that responded to behavior with judgment. No rulers, no rebellions, just structure, the scribe's design. Toval hadn't told the others. Not yet, but the image gnawed at him. If this was what they'd escaped into, if the escape had only led them forward into the very thing they'd tried to flee, then what had they truly changed? He brought it to Melis first. They stood alone at the edge of the outcrop, the wind dry and low. "It's not showing us a future," she said. "It's showing us a choice." He looked at her. Between what? Between fear and memory. Her eyes closed for a moment. That's how the scribe infects civilizations. Not with war. With history. It lets them remember just enough to destroy themselves. Toval shook his head. "Then why are we still here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she knelt and drew a circle in the dirt. "The key isn't a weapon," she said quietly. "It's a mirror." That night, Jexa called a meeting. They gathered in the old command room, its ceiling scarred with burn marks from the crash landing. She laid out a schematic on the table, a map of the surrounding systems, overlaid with ancient imperial drift paths. "We've intercepted transmissions," she said. "Encrypted, but the pattern is unmistakable. Empire craft, searching for us, or something that leads to us." Vera leaned in. They found the gate. Toval nodded slowly. It never closed. We only interrupted its awakening. Jex's gaze sharpened. Then we have a decision. We stay, and when they come, we burn, or we act. Vera's voice was cold. We can't attack a gate. Not with what we have. Not to destroy it, Maylee said from the doorway. To rewrite it. They turned. Her eyes were lit from within, not madness, but a clarity so focused it made Toval uneasy. The key has more than one alignment, she continued. The scribe expects only resistance. It's never seen a civilization rewrite its own wound. Toval's breath caught. You want to change the vault? Maylis nodded. We return, together, not as conquerors, as architects. Silence fell over the room. Jexa folded her arms. And if it's waiting, then we teach it something new. They left before dawn. 3 ships, each rigged with old-world stealth tech and untraceable IDs. Slipped from Exler's gravity were like shadows dissolving in fog. The journey would take weeks through back channels and void scars, but none of them hesitated. They passed relics of war, derelict battleships floating like bones in black oceans. They dodged Imperial satellites still broadcasting laws to worlds that no longer obeyed. And when they neared the vault, something stirred. Not a signal, a presence. The gate no longer looked dormant. Its rings shimmered with pulses of light like a heartbeat, and the space around it bent subtly, as though reluctant to exist. They docked in silence. Inside, the chamber was unchanged. The console still pulsed. And standing in the center was the scribe. It did not speak. Maylee stepped forward, the key in her hands. The scribe extended its own, identical in shape and glow. They met in the air, not a clash, not a fusion. A resonance. Toval felt behind his eyes. Language without words, memory without images. A connection beyond comprehension. The gate shifted. No longer a wound. A bridge. The scribe turned to them, its voice like wind across glass. This is not the end. Maylee's answer without fear. No, it's the beginning. And the light engulfed them.